Good afternoon, members, officers, and any members of the public in the public gallery. There isn't, sorry. But welcome online, and welcome to this meeting of the Employment and Staffing Committee. My name is Councillor Will Jackson Wood, and I'm chairing the meeting today. My vice chair is Councillor Sally Anna Hart to my left. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Can I just also say thank you for bearing with us, because we have had to shift this meeting around. So thank you, members, for bearing with us on that particular point. Just a quick note that this meeting is being live streamed. So at some point your screens or phones might be available or on screen to the public, so just be aware of that. And if you're joining remotely, please make sure that your camera and microphone remains off unless you're addressing the committee. When you are presenting, then please make sure that you give it a second before you start speaking. Do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, yes, we have apologies from Councillor Richard Stobart and Councillor John Williams.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no worries. And Councillor Heather Williams just joined us. Sorry, we did delay a little bit. Yeah, thank you. Cool. It's just that he said, we've literally just started, so all good. So, do we have any declarations of interest from any members at all? No? Okay. And minutes of the previous meeting. Do any members have any suggested amendments relating to the accuracy of the meeting held on the 13th of February this year? No? Therefore, we can approve. Sorry.
I've got an update.
Oh, super. Yes, please go ahead, Jeff.
Just to give members an update, the minutes show a question that we received from a member of the public in relation to the real living wage, and as part of the chair's response, she pointed out that we were in negotiation with the unions around pay for 24-25, and we were looking at whether we could feasibly move to a minimum rate of £15 per hour by April 2026. So in effect, a real living wage plus. I'm pleased to say that review was concluded, and as part of the wage negotiations for this year, the council was able to commit to reaching £15 an hour by April 2026 in two steps. First, we've moved to £13.50 an hour from April this year, and we'll be moving to £15 an hour for April next year. So I think that's positive.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note, I wasn't on committee up until today, so I will abstain from the minutes.
Of course. Thank you. Any other comments or any other points around the minutes, or are we able to approve these and move ahead? Yeah? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We've had no public questions received, so we can move on to the report by Robertson Cooper, which is being presented by Jeff.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a report detailing the latest results of our welfare wellbeing survey for 2025. We continue to see positive results, with the authority performing better than benchmark in the vast majority of areas. Also, we continue to see a significant improvement over when the first survey was undertaken. This is now the fourth survey. One thing I do have to bring to members' attention, though, is, and it's highlighted in Helen's report, in doing some internal checking before writing the existing the report for this year's survey, Robertson Cooper found that there had been an error in some of the tabulations for the report last year. the error related to a relatively small number of returns that were done manually. Most people completed an online survey, but for many of our colleagues at the depot, it was easier for them to return a paper survey, and there was an error in the person inputting the data, who answered some questions where the answer was no as yes, and some questions where the answer was yes as no. As the number of paper surveys were much smaller than the online surveys, this didn't have a significant impact in the vast majority of questions, but there was one area where it did have quite a significant impact, and that was because with most of the paper surveys coming from the depot, that was where we had most answers to the question about whether people were working a second job. As a result of the incorrect data being entered, it stated that 16% of people who were working a 4-day week now had a second job. That should have been 2%, which was consistent with what we had reported to us in the previous years. We do have a representative of Roberts and Cooper here online. I think Matt's online, in case members have got any questions about that particular error. Apart from that, I think the report is a very positive report.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have any questions at all regarding the report? Yes, Councillor Williams.
My question's kind of in threefold. Would you like me to sort of list them all in once or go one at a time, Chair?
You can do them all together. I think we're small enough numbers to do that, yeah.
Okie dokie. So I'm going to start off in relation to the errors that's just been highlighted. Seems like the appropriate place to start. And it's just a bit of inconsistency as well as how the responses to questions have been had through this process. So appreciate the explanation that's been given, and I think actually a lot of the concern of members was because it was a significant increase in this hike. However, when we first had those discussions, it was said that everybody had a job beforehand and that had been sort of checked. And I'm wondering if that had been checked, how we still didn't pick up on the fact that there'd been an error till this point. Mistakes happen, granted, but it's been a significant amount of time since that was published, and why has it taken so long to come to light? The other thing is that it concerns me about the checks and balances of the report writing from, this is a company, it's not internal, this is a service we are paying for, and actually the taxpayer is paying for. So it makes me concerned about what other reports are being put together by Roberts and Cooper, how much we are reliant upon that information, as we can see that their sort of testing of the system obviously didn't work in this case. And I'm wondering whether, given that it was such an administrative error, that it brought, it's a bit of a negligent thing to do, really. You should be able to, if you offer a service that has online and paper, to be able to marry those up and put them forward in the right place. So I'm wondering, on behalf of the taxpayer, are we seeking reimbursement? Because the quality of the report we were given obviously was not what we had assumedly contracted for. So that's my first clarification around errors.
Okay.
And then I have two others, Chair.
Okay, thank you. On the basis of the complexity, are we all right just going back on what I just mentioned and doing those separately? Is that okay?
Absolutely, Chair.
Okay, great. Can I just hand... Okay, thank you. Jeff, are you all right just pressing that for a second?
Well, I'll answer part of this, then I'll probably need to ask Matt to come in and talk about what quality checking Roberts and Cooper has in place. Absolutely, you're right, Councillor Williams. Both members and officers were surprised at the result. We did go back to Roberts and Cooper, and they confirmed that that's what the stats had told them. We then did put quite a lot of time and effort into doing a comprehensive exercise with staff at the depot, finding out those people who had second jobs and finding out whether they had those second jobs before the 4-day week had started. So we did put quite a lot of time and effort into that. We did get a reduction in charge from Robertson Cooper. I must admit, I can't remember off the top of my head how much that was, but we did get a reduction in charge. And I think one of the things that happened as a result of that challenge was Robertson Cooper put in place an internal review of the report, which is how this was then identified. But to give you more details on that, I'll hand you over to Matt. If you could come in and answer that, please, Matt.
Yes, I will do, if you can all hear me and see me now. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in this forum. Firstly, I'd like to offer our sincere apologies for the error on that one question, which, as Jeff highlighted, occurred on the 24 survey, and it was something that we identify ourselves as the part of the 2025 results analysis. So the error occurred to explain how that kind of came through and what we did to remedy it, and how we'll make sure that won't happen again. There were several minor factors at play, which any of them alone would be very unlikely to cause an issue, but together in this case resulted in that error. Firstly, we allowed a change in the survey data collection methods compared to the previous year, and that was to include paper-based surveys alongside the online surveys for that particular question for a wider demographic of employees. And when we make that change, it makes it slightly more difficult to make those comparisons and to understand the reasons for those changes, as Jeff highlighted. So now our platform automatically records and aggregates online survey responses, and completed paper-based surveys are entered separately into an electronic file, and they tend to be merged and all uploaded. So the results are all analysed together. We don't do that separately. And that process normally works really well. So again, allowing that change or allowing those two different methods of data collection doesn't normally cause an issue. Within the survey as well, the third factor is that we included that non-standard question. We have a standard question set, which is a validated psychological wellbeing assessment tool. We can and often do include additional survey questions. So again, doesn't usually cause an issue. And this was the question about second jobs. And when that question was coded into the system, this caused a minor system error, which meant the results of that question were not being recorded correctly. We identified this during the data analysis after the online and paper-based results were merged. We fixed it and we corrected the results. However, and this is where I think perhaps the information that Jeff provided wasn't quite accurate, the error applied only to the online survey responses. The paper-based results were actually all correct, and they were entered correctly and they were uploaded and were entirely accurate. But when we applied the fix for the online results, where the results weren't displaying properly, that then meant that those results are correct, but it applied across the board, and it made those accurate original paper-based responses inaccurate. As we said, that was a small percentage of the results. Essentially, that fix flipped one part of the results and unfortunately flipped results which were already correct as well. Our data analysts should have unmerged, taken apart those two sets of results before that fix was applied. And that meant that the increased percentage of results showed that more people appeared to have a second job than they actually did. And because we have then had that new member of population as part of your employee database who were engaged in that survey, who weren't previously, that was the reason that was attributed for that higher percentage being there. So all of those minor small issues came to the point is our data analysts didn't catch that piece. In terms of ensuring this kind of error can't happen again, we are under new management this year, and we have updated our systems and processes, including our platform technical capability. And we've also introduced additional quality assurance processes. And those processes are ISO 9001 and 27001 accredited. And those processes are the reason why this error was identified. When we analysed this year's survey results, we went back and applied that same updated analysis approach to last year's, at which point we identified the error and we highlighted it to the council, and we did offer compensation, as Jeff said, as a result of that, because it's a fairly unprecedented issue for us. And I do reiterate our apology for it, but hopefully that now makes a little bit more sense as to how that occurred and what we've done about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just keep my questions to the errors for the moment,
Yep.
supplementary ones. I have to say that the explanations to response to my questions have not filled me with much security for the future, nor the past, which is very important. When we look at page 11 on the response rates, people totaled invited, okay, 740, so definitely the biggest, but we also know the council is expanding. Previously, and I know from my many years ago when I previously sat on this committee, that paper surveys for the waste crews in Waterbeach has been the standard process because it's very difficult to get them, you know, they haven't got the emails and everything else. So we have had this situation with paper and online together before. So what assurances do we have that errors aren't in the previous sets? This isn't just we've done it 2 years on the trot and one was with and one was without. We've got these others as well. And also, why is there such a difference between Robertson Cooper and South Cambs and our officers, Chair, when we were told that it was because it was mainly the waste crews that had these second jobs and everything else. And now we're being told, no, the issue was actually on desk-based staff. So how have we got to the point, so what are we, 6 months on since all that sort of came out, maybe less, where we're sat in the chamber today and getting two conflicting situations? Where is the communication? What is going wrong? Why can't we seem to be on the same path? And if this is not working, I'm very concerned that we rely on this data going forward. That's just on the errors, Chair. Let me know when you're ready for the others.
Sure, okay. Is there any other follow-up points or questions around that on the errors before we move on?
On the errors, I think we really need to understand not only what happened to the error, but why there's this breakdown of communication, and why we're being told conflicting things in this meeting.
Sure, okay. Thank you. Jeff, can I hand it to you and then maybe back to Matt as well?
Yes, certainly. The first two surveys didn't include the waste crews because the survey was brought in the survey was being used specifically to measure the impact of the 4-day week. So until the waste crews were involved in the 4-day week trial, they weren't being dealt with as part of this same survey. So the mistake happened the first time that the paper surveys, I think, were included. Yes, I had misunderstood. Sorry, I've misunderstood. I thought that Robertson Cooper had said it was an issue with the paper surveys, but it sounds like it wasn't. However, people put in the survey the area that they work from, and the analysis is done around that. So we know that the people that answered that question were from the waste service. So we were able. So when we went down and did the exercise with the waste crews, that was where the majority of people who were being reported as having a second job were working. Now, as it turns out, it might be the case now that, you know, if we look at the answer correctly, those people probably aren't any more likely than colleagues in other areas to have second jobs. But the information we had at the time was people that worked in the waste service were the ones saying that they had second jobs, and that's how we focused our investigation.
Thank you for that. Do you want to have any supplementary information from Robert, Skipper and Matt, or are you happy with that response to that particular last question?
It depends if that answers Councillor Williams' question or whether she needs some more input from that.
Councillor Williams?
I think understanding the communication channels between the two of you from both sides is important, because when we're making decisions, we have to be able to rely on the data, and things are presented to us as independent, and we've had our challenges with that in the past. You know, it's important that whatever our opinions are, that the data is reliable enough for us to make, and we have faith and trust, and importantly our residents do. So the communication here seems to have had a bit of a breakdown. Now, whose side of that? That's not for us to decide in this meeting right here, right now, but I'd ask both to go away and reflect as to how we can ensure this doesn't happen again.
Okay, understood, or thank you for your comments. So can we move on to the next question from that, please?
Yes, Chair, happily. So the next section around the costs of the doing this exercise, because originally it used to be that we used to do a sort of health and well-being survey every so many years, and I have to say I think that's very important that we do that, and I do think it is important that it's independent to our own officers, because people again need to have that trust in confidentiality. I think 2018 was the first one that I was involved with. We had Susan Gardner-Craig, for those that remember her back then, a very good officer, and it was very, very clear what we were doing. We then had another one just before the 4-day week, before anyone was told that it was even being considered, understandably to get that reflection. We were then told that all these things had been planned and therefore they weren't cost to the 4-day week because it was a planned programme of work. However, this document suggests otherwise. And the fact that we can see from page 11 that only people on the 4-day week have taken part in some of these responses. It's not been an organisation-wide affair. So where is the reality in between what we've been sort of told in the past and where we are? Are these surveys and the cost of these surveys because of the 4-day week, or is it routine work that we'd normally be doing? Because this report suggests that we are having extra surveys because of the 4-day week, but have these been taken into consideration when evaluating the cost of the trial? Because so far I believe it only costs really have been consultation and waste crews.
Thank you for the question. Just so I understand, because I'd like to keep things sort of like ring-fenced to what we're actually discussing as far as this report is concerned. So are we actually discussing the output of this report?
Yes, it's here on page 11, you can see,
Yep.
and it goes through to say that they want to look and continue the progress and to look at it, the feasibility of a shift to a 4-day week. So it says that these Robertson-Cooper surveys are to monitor the 4-day week, but historically we've been told they are standard custom and practice that happen every few years. So is this report correct, or what we've been told in the past correct?
Got it, got the question. Thank you. Jeff, can I hand that to you?
Yeah, the council does and has regularly undertaken staff welfare surveys. There was a gap during the COVID years because it was difficult to undertake surveys at that time, and we weren't quite sure what we should be asking. The Robertson-Cooper survey, when we reinstated the surveys, the Robertson-Cooper survey that was undertaken just before the 4-day week trial started was the first staff welfare survey that we restarted after COVID. So it is part of an ongoing programme of staff welfare surveys. Yes, I think it's true to say that the survey was probably brought forward, so that it was the first of those surveys were undertaken before the 4-day week trial, so that there was a baseline to gather the information. But we're talking bringing it forward by a number of months rather than by a number of years. There was due to be a survey that year anyway. And the intention is to continue to have staff welfare surveys ongoing. There's no ongoing contract with Robertson-Cooper, so we're not saying it will necessarily be with Robertson-Cooper, but staff welfare surveys are an important part of monitoring the welfare of the organisation, whether we've got a 4-day week or a 5-day week. So the intention is to continue to have those surveys.
So thank you. Yes, Councillor Williams.
I didn't quite hear an answer as to the cost of these, and I hear what you're saying, it's part of planned ongoing work, but it was never due to be annual work. Are we saying we're now doing this annually? Because that's what appears to have happened if you look at time 1 to 4. It's become an annual thing, whereas it used to be sort of every sort of 2-3 years.
I think they're ongoing, but sorry, yes, Jeff.
Yeah, they are ongoing, but I'm sorry, my recollection, I'll have to double check, but my recollection is they were every year. So I'll double check that to make sure it's accurate and get back to you. But I think I've sent you the cost details before, Councillor Williams, or am I misremembering?
I'm just asking what the cost of each of these surveys are in a public meeting.
Okay,
We're discussing the cost because we've got money back. What's the percentage of the money we've got back?
It was a 10% reduction that we got back. Again, the costs, I'd rather find out what the costs are than say something here and find out that I'm misremembering. So
Can
I'll
you have it
find out.
circulated to all members of the committee and included in the minutes then, please, Chair?
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think it's quite, and you know, from a return on investment standpoint, I think it's important to be transparent. So yes, if that's all right, then please, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
Last one on this report, unless anybody else says anything that prompts my mind, Chair. In relation to motivation on page 20, one of the things that still concerns me, and I think has concerned many members regardless of their views of the current working arrangements, is about that motivation and that burnout rate. Because we're seeing in some other, sorry, page 20 of the report. Does that help you, James? On the What's It report. You see the motivation, T2? You got it? Yeah. Burnout is something that I think is really important that we take seriously and focus in on. And we can see there's been some shifts of people moving to 5 days but on reduced hours. And when we look at the motivation, you can sort of see that it really peaks to begin with. It's what you'd expect. It then sort of, the last 2 years has dropped a little bit more. There's very little difference between these two. But I'm just wondering, is there enough metrics in this report because to sort of look at burnout? Because when we then look at the staff health and well-being in relation to stress, which I'll double check my page references, but at page 46 of the main agenda, when it talks about stress, what we can see is for those people that are finding it stressful, their stress really is impacting them much more than it was before. And so are we as a committee, I don't think I am comfortable that we have enough metrics to really assess whether or not burnout is becoming a reality, because we've reduced the capacity. If we then, so now, if 1 or 2 members of a team sort of have to take time out for stress, and when we look at these about stress adversely impacting you, it's going up. If you look on that bottom graph there, from slightly agree, strongly agree, we can see that increase. If we then lose those people to burnout or stress, that means they can no longer work, the impact is much higher because they are having to do 125% per day. So every day they have off costs us more in productivity and capacity than it did before. So do we feel there are better metrics to really evaluate? Because I appreciate for the majority of people, they're finding it a better experience. And who wouldn't, right? If anybody was saying to you, you can have a day off every week and you didn't have to increase your hours on those days. But we do have the situation of those that it's not helping, it's actually making it worse for them. And is the smaller benefit to the majority worth the adverse impact to those that are struggling?
Thank you for the question. It's reading into these data can always be quite tricky. Jeff, can I hand it to you to sort of like field that as an issue?
Yes, certainly. I think stress is really an important issue in this day and age, and there's lots of things happening that can increase stress on people. I know people are anxious, for example, about local government reorganisation at the moment, where there's a lack of understanding as to what it might mean for individuals. If the committee would like, we'd be happy to bring a report specifically on stress-related issues and how we can address them to a future committee meeting.
Chair, I'd like to propose that we take that up because we're seeing that escalation in that cohort of employees.
Yes, certainly. I think also that the total number is shrinking as well. But can we, Councillor Hansraj, do you have a question or a follow-up? Just turn your mic on, please. Thank you.
So when it comes to measuring stress, I feel there are some variables here. We don't know. Was the answer purely related to somebody's work, or were there any predisposed? You could look into the stress as deeply as you want. Has something changed in their lives, and this and that and the other? This provides value in that managers then could take a member of staff and help them through, talk them through as to what the factors are, and so it's valuable in that sense.
Yeah, agreed. Was that a comment, or did you have a question? Oh, that's perfect. Thank you. Like, I've got sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, great. Yeah, perfect.
Just regarding stress, the people team support managers, of course, throughout when an employee is struggling with stress at work. If it's raised to us, we've got things such as stress assessment tools, which they can use to both mitigate stress at work, but also in their personal lives. We can support them with referrals to things such as counselling and occupational health for adjustments, etc., just directly related to stress, yeah.
So, thank you. Yes, Councillor Raj.
So what I see here then is, from what you say, is that there might be a better manager-staff relationship being built up here. So that is of value when somebody is looking at stress in the workforce. I don't know what it has been before this, but I think the communication then starts and is better management of a member of staff results in. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm also mindful of using terms. Oh, sorry, did you have another follow-up? You did? Okay.
Yes, it was just something I thought would help clarify. If we actually look at the questions, figure 20, because it was mentioned about home life stress, and if anyone had had my morning at home, they'd be feeling very stressed right now, I can assure you. But this is very specifically, during the 4-day week trial, did you feel your levels of stress increased? Less people are saying it as they did before, but those people who did answer are increased. So the question is about the 4-day week, not about their personal circumstances.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Hazard. Sure, no, please. Yeah.
I would argue that it's not as cut as dry as that. That's all I have to say. Having actually managed staff in a team, I feel confident in saying that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hazard. And I agree, certainly from my perspective as well. I think it's quantitative data. It's stuff that we've actually got here. We need to take it on face value, but I think the more that we can push down on this and we actually understand how it's having an impact on the overall staff is obviously key, and that's why we're here. So yes, any additional information that we can have is going to be gratefully received. But of course, I think it is painting a picture that overall it's looking positive. Is there anything else, or is there any other comments that we've got to move forward with before we note the report?
I haven't had a response on whether, when I talk about burnout and motivation, whether that's the right way to be sort of assessing it, or if there are other ways to assess burnout.
Can we I need to be really mindful over the term burnout, because I think that's something that's very different to stress as a whole.
That's why it's a separate question.
Okay. Jeff, can you add anything to that?
Can I ask Will if he's able to explain how motivation is measured in the survey, please? Sorry, Matt.
Oh yeah, you see me now? In terms of the tool overall, it doesn't specifically look at burnout. It looks at a lot of the factors that may record it, and the stress-related section is part of research by Robertson Cooper, which is a validated psychological assessment tool called ASSET. And it's very similar to the Health and Safety Executives Management Standards approach of looking at 6 different work-related risk factors that measure stress. So it's recognised as the industry best practice as the way to measure it. And if there are therefore high risks in that area, that could be a contributor to burnout. Burnout, according to the World Health Organization, being that long-term unaddressed work-related stress which causes ill health. As you mentioned, that they tend to be quite different things. In terms of motivation, that will be as part of the engagement metrics that links into the report. So in terms of more detail on that one, if you'd like a more detailed response, or would you like a little bit of an additional analysis to answer the councillor's question, I could ask our team of psychologists and data analysts to prepare a response and provide that offline as an appendix to the report.
Yes, thank you for that. Councillor Williams, do you have a response?
Yeah, I think given everything, I think it's really important that we do address and have the right metrics for burnout and make sure that we're looking at it. And it just felt like it was something sort of missing from these reports. So I'd welcome more information on that. And just on the comments that were said about that intensifying, I think that's why it's really, figure 21 makes it very important that we do that and have more work into it, because we don't want to be doing something that, you know, like I say, the smaller benefit to most, really making an adverse impact to a proportion of the staff.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Is there any other comments or anything else that any other members would like to address before we note the reports and move on? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you very much, Matt, for joining us online. We then move to the next point, which is the anti-racism charter, which I'm going to hand back to Jeff again.
Yes, I think Jonathan's going to be presenting on this report, but before we present it, I do have to apologise to Councillor Timmy Hawkins. Due to a misunderstanding, the report was forwarded to Democratic Services and published before she'd signed it off. Councillor Hawkins has agreed for the report to go ahead as it's an officer update, but our apologies. We're working with Democratic Services to ensure that that mistake can't happen again. With that, I'll hand you over to Jonathan.
Thanks very much. So the Anti-Racism Charter was signed off by the Council, has a timescale of 12 months to implement all the objectives, and the objectives are all in the appendix that were attached to the report. This is the 6-month update, which confirms we have a plan to complete all of the outstanding work schemes in the timescale, and I just want to highlight some of the key objectives from the appendix. The first is we had a goal: we need to have a clear and visible race equality policy championed by leadership. In doing research into this, we found out the importance of having an equality policy as well as a statement of principles and a toolkit for best practice. The drafts of these documents are all being reviewed at the moment, and hopefully they'll be ready to be submitted to the next Employment, Staff and Committee meeting, as they would be for any new policy, other policy that needs to be signed off. Secondly, we had an objective about providing unconscious bias and anti-racism training for colleagues and members. The working group has been devising some bespoke e-learning for our online learning platform Skills Hub. It's being redesigned to make it more engaging, as it will be compulsory, but we do hope for the first module to be launched in the next few weeks. We're also looking to support different learning styles as well. Members of the working group are contacting the Cambridge Ethnic Community Forum to develop some experience-based unconscious bias training online and in person. We also had another objective about looking at a support network for staff experiencing racism in the workplace. We've been developing an anonymous reporting tool so we can obtain further details for investigation. We're also looking at how we can prevent potential misuse through malicious reporting, so that tool is still in development at the moment. We've also looked to expand the terms of reference of our established EDI staff forum and looking to promote much more cross-council working so that complex projects and support networks can be made, and we can benefit from a much wider group of people looking at these issues that affect very similar organisations. We also committed to undertake ethnicity pay gap reporting and to publish the results. I'm pleased to say that our employee privacy notice has been updated to include ethnicity pay gap reporting as something we would do on an ongoing basis, and we finalised the methodology so we can include that in the 2026 pay policy statement. And finally, we're looking to undertake workforce ethnicity reporting relating to people metrics and publish the results. The people team working very closely with the data and intelligence team at the moment to create reporting dashboards in Power BI, and ethnicity reporting will be a much big part of that. So in terms of all the main objectives and the things we've got to do, we're still on track with those and we're working towards them now. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you, Jonathan. Do we have any questions back to Jonathan? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to draw members' attention to page 58. But before I start, I think there has always been full support across the chamber for calling out, stamping out any form of discrimination, including this. So it is a really positive thing and positive steps the council are taking to do this. It says on page 58 about developing the discrimination and harassment toolkit for staff who are subject to unacceptable behaviours from a service user / customer. I think it's also important that it's a toolkit for actually if they experience it from other members of staff as well, not just users and customers. And that also it's not just for those who have been subject to it, but for others that have seen and identified it, because actually a lot of these things don't start full blown at the start. It creeps up on you, and that discrimination gets worse and worse, but you are so used to it that you may not even identify it when it's happening to yourself. So I think it's really important that it's not just about, the responsibility is not just on the person at the receiving end, but that it's a collective responsibility for everybody to report. I'd also say there's an opportunity here, I'm sure it's been taken, but I hope you can reassure us that it's included, that whilst this is a sort of a plan in relation to racism, that other forms of discrimination are equally going to be included in the discrimination and harassment toolkit, because that's obviously a much broader toolkit in its terms, and that the inclusion of misogyny will very much be part of it. As a councillor, in this council and outside of this council, in my view, I have been on the end of misogynistic comments in this chamber and throughout the building. I have witnessed misogyny as I perceive it through people. We've witnessed other things as well, but I'm going to speak to my experience, Chair. And I actually think misogyny is something that really the public still seem to have, and a lot of people seem to have a difficulty in grasping those nuances. You know, it's those sort of comments and the like. And I think a lot of it is unconscious bias, a lot of it can be generational differences of social habit. But unfortunately, I think we can see that it is on the rise, very much so. So it's fantastic work that's been done here, but if there is an opportunity to create a one-stop shop, for want of a better word, in that toolkit, that does include misogyny, I think would be very important, as is every other form of discrimination, Chair.
Thank you, and completely agree that obviously anything we do to tackle it and bring forward any kind of toolkit or anything to be able to tackle it is incredibly important. Jonathan or Jeff, do you have any sort of thoughts or comments on that at all?
Yes, thank you. Just to pick up some of the points that you raised, Councillor Williams, sort of in terms of the reference to members of staff and people that might witness things, it's not just about users and customers. We have our current existing respect and resolution policy designed for internal between if things happen between different members of staff. So it's really building on that and not, it's not saying it's instead of, but we're saying this is the stuff that we need to do in addition to what we're currently doing in terms of internal resolution. And the toolkit very much is emphasising people's rights in relation to those policies, not just saying here is the policy, it's explaining how you actually progress something and what rights that you have to be respected in the workplace. We think the anonymous reporting tool will be a very significant thing to help people that may have seen something or identified something but may not necessarily have been directly impacted by it, because it should support people in the same way. If you've seen something and you're not sure about it, you can report through that tool in the same way. And definitely when the discrimination toolkit comes across, it breaks down all the different types of discrimination you might be subject to from the 9 protected characteristics in the equality report, and explains, it goes through race, gender, everything else that you can think of, and a little bit of guidance about each of those issues. So it does cover that. So when the report and when the policy comes across, I'll be happy to share that with you in the final version.
Thank you. Do you have a response to that particular one?
Yes, please. Thank you for those comments. I think as well, if we can look at the training, because it seems to be, we've had, quite rightly, a lot of Romani training and traveller about non-discrimination. We've had it in relation to racism, as you can see through this. We don't seem to have it when it comes to discrimination of women. It just seems to not get gathered up in that sense. And I just think that's something that's missing, and this looks like an opportunity to try and help support that.
Thank you. Do you want to make any comments on that just before I move on to our next question? Either of you?
I'm happy to take that on board.
Yeah, I think so. That'd be great. Thank you. Councillor Hansarge, do you have a question? Sorry, your mic on, please.
Thanks. Do you have a whistle? Did you say you had a whistleblowing? You said that. Okay. And do you have a bullying and harassment policy? Because things like misogyny, which we don't have a thing yet, could go through that.
I'm happy for you both to absolutely yes. So any comments on either side of you?
So through the anti-bullying policies, that very much goes through the sort of the bullying distinction. It's not so much on discrimination. Now, somebody through unconscious biases and discriminating can then be perceived bullying. However, it's the cause rather than the actual act itself, because you can be bullied without it being because of any protected characteristics. So they fall in very different categories. So the whistleblowing as well come through the Task and Finish group. It was some years ago now, probably worth a refresh, but that's something I think we're looking at through audit and corporate governance. So those documents come through audit as part of the corporate governance structure there, but they are classified in different ways. One may come out of the other, but one is not a necessary component of the other, so they do have separate policies in place.
Thanks for that. Jonathan, would you like any follow-up on that? Or?
Just to say that we have our the respect and resolution policy that combines the grievance and the dignity at work policy combined. So we do have those issues that are covered into it. So we do have the ability for anyone, if those types of issues are someone subject to them or they experience them, they witness them, they can raise something through that policy.
No comment, bullying shouldn't be bullying in isolation. It should be a bullying and harassment. They're two separate things.
They're all covered in terms of that in that policy. They're all references.
What's the policy title?
Respect and resolution.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yes, I am.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for highlighting how many things are on progressing in a timely manner in this charter. I mean, I think it's, having been at the launch of the Anti-Racism Charter, just seeing how far South Cambs District Council has come, I think is really pleasing, and I'm really mindful that there are some red areas, and I think maybe it's sort of unrealistic to think we could get all the way through that because it is so complicated. Just one other comment I wanted to make is that I feel really pleased to see that the training on unconscious bias it went offered in a variety of styles. There's the e-learning, and I think there is real benefit for in-person as well. And hopefully people will make choices at which one they feel safer. But there's something very powerful about sitting with other people, I think, and in a room and being able to have those conversations. Can be quite tricky to handle. So I welcome the fact that really taking some time to make sure that what we get is fit for purpose and helps people feel safe enough to have some quite uncomfortable discussions at times. So yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. I look forward to hearing how much further we get. Thank you.
It's great, thank you. And yes, echo that. So I think it's great to see quite how far it's come already, and great to sort of see a very sort of progressive environment coming from that. Any other comments or any thoughts from any members before we note the report and move on? If not, then happy to note. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Jonathan, for all your help and answers on that one, and also to Councillor Williams for addressing all the questions. We move on to people recruitment and retention absence data, which we're going to hand over to Joshua to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So to provide a summary of the report for quarter four, in quarter four there was an increased number of applications to external vacancies, with the average number of applications per role significantly increasing compared to quarter three. This could be expected in part due to the proximity to the end of the financial year, but also the Christmas period ending. Of 32 roles that were advertised, 27 of which successful offers were made. 2 candidates withdrew from the process, and 3 roles were not filled due to a lack of suitable candidates. 3 of those 5 roles have now been successfully filled. The 3-month post-induction staff survey showed that we had 19 new starters, of which were 6 respondents. 5 rated their induction as good or excellent. There were 10 voluntary leavers in quarter four, and of the 3 that completed our leaver questionnaire, 2 of them stated that it was due to a career break, and the last one for career progression. Looking now at the sickness absence data, there has been a decrease in sickness overall. Days lost due to short-term and long-term absences did increase in January, then steeply declined between February and March. As you can see in chart 8. In terms of wider context, it was noted on the last report that we may have Infinistats data available for this report. However, and just to explain what Infinistats is, it's a benchmarking tool that other local councils use to input some metrics relating to things such as sickness and pay, and other councils can access that and use it to benchmark against the other organisations. We're now in the process of putting in the data for Infinistats, so we're hoping to have some data available for quarter 2 of 25-26, but that could change depending on when other councils submit their data. We continue to support line managers, the people team, and do educational pieces on things such as physical health, which we did in January time. Including things such as smoking awareness and introducing a new cohort of mental health first aiders to the organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I have a couple of points on this, but do we have any questions? Councillor Williams.
I do, but I am happy to go after you, Chair, if you so wish. It's up to you.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So in relation to something that was said in the introduction of the report on page 75, about 19 new starters, and only 6 of them, which means 13 didn't, which is the high majority, completed the induction survey. Just wondering why that was, because you'd hope when people first join, that's when they're the most keen to fill in the forms and the surveys and everything else. So that was my question, if there was a reason for that. And if not, Chair, then we might need to look at how that goes about. The other thing that puzzled me was about B, and I wonder what the questions were, to sort of say the 4-day week child, had the 5 of 6 said that positive impact on their well-being, because if they weren't here before the trial, how do you get that comparison? It could just be that the job before was really unpleasant or really not that very good. So just wondering how that's working. And then my last question, in relation to sickness and the stats, because we are now into the comparisons for the sort of 22-21. I do think 4 or 5 lines actually is more beneficial when you're analysing the data than the 3. It also, and now we have the whole situation of COVID, which makes it a bit tricky sometimes. So being able to have that sort of wider range, it makes it a bit easier to see where the differences may be. And I just want to make sure that when we are making an appreciation for the fact that the majority of staff are doing the 4-day week in those 4 days, which we saw from the early report, rather than doing the same hours over the 5 days. So that now means that every day, because of the concept of 100% of work in 80% of the time, so 100% of the work in 4 days, that now means that if people have a day off, the FTE equivalent is 1.25, not 1 for 1, because now the capacity and the expectation of productivity is essentially an extra 25% in order to recoup the 25% on their non-working day. So has that been factored into this? Because sickness seems to be something that we seem to be struggling to sort of get a steer on when it comes to evaluating things.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'll hand, sorry, that's my voice there for a second. I'll go back to Joshua in a second. I will just say about the 1.25 though, because I don't know if I agree personally. When I say that, I just mean the fact that what I understand it to be is not doing 5 days work in 4. It's just increasing productivity. So it's a case of actually still doing the same amount of work, but, okay.
So if I can,
Yeah.
that's the point. Before the trial, your 1 day was your day's work. Now, the productivity to increase, so the idea is that you can do an extra 25% through being more productive. So the value of that day is now not 1, it's 1 plus the 25. Because that's the whole idea. If it was 80% of the work and 80%, then it's like for like, you're only expecting 1. But now the value and the cost, if a member of staff is off for that day, is so much more on productivity terms, because it's the 1 plus 25%. And that's where I'm coming from. That day now is worth a lot more than it was, because you're trying to do more in that 1 day.
Okay, I understand the point. I think just from my perspective, I see it in a slightly different way. I think that it is obviously not a 5 in 4, and I think that's one thing we've got to sort of bear in mind when we're taking that into account, but I understand your point. Joshua, can we hand back to you just for a couple of answers on those from Councillor Williams, please?
Yeah. So in regards to the new joiner survey, that was a one-off because it was sent out slightly late, which means there wasn't as long an amount of time for people to respond. However, they also, obviously, it's 3 months in arrears as well, so someone could have started at the first start of the month. Their induction period can last for the longer 3 months, but they might not have then responded to it as well. In relation to the decision to apply to the role and positive impact on their well-being, we don't do a direct comparison between their previous role, how they felt there, and how they feel now, and whether or not the working here, because of the 4-day week, has had a direct impact, because that's more of a qualitative thing that we haven't asked a question on. If you feel like there's more data that's needed to be picked up on there, then we may be able to look at the form. Did you want to?
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Williams, have a follow-up question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just what you're saying, that the problem is the report says 5 of the 6 said the child has had a positive impact on their well-being. So I think I completely agree with what you said. You can't make that comparison. Therefore, that cannot be qualified, that sentence, if that makes sense. So how have we come to that conclusion? Because, as you just said, you can't compare apples and pears.
So sorry, the question in the form itself, I believe, is do you believe that the 4-day week has had a positive impact on your well-being? So the member of staff is responding yes or no to that. But in terms of if you wanted to dig deeper into the data, for us to analyse, we can't get much more than what they feel as to whether or not it is positively impacting them or not, without doing something more.
So it's completely subjective, with them having no comparison of what it'd be like to work here 5 days.
For new joiners, for this quarter, they wouldn't have worked in a non-4-day week environment before unless they worked in another organisation with a 4-day week. No. But if they have worked somewhere else before, then the 4-day week is obviously something that they're responding to, and that would have impacted their well-being.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazraj. Can you speak? Put your mic on, sorry.
I just wondered why COVID was mentioned. I see figures here from 2022 to now. So
Sorry. you're
Did
gonna have to-
someone mention COVID? Because that should, in...
Oh,
the-
sorry, that was actually one of my points. So I think actually the data that we've got is all post-COVID.
Yeah,
It is, but that was me that said we had problematic issues through the COVID times of getting those comparisons, but it does then mean that we don't have the turnover figures because we've only going on those 3 years. I think we actually need to look at it over a wider scale. Admittedly, we will need to know that COVID was in those, but at the moment we don't know what our voluntary turnover is in comparison to pre-COVID, if that makes sense.
can we compare that? I mean,
Just
you
need
don't
some
know
more
if you
lines
have
on
the
the
same
graph.
staff in the first place.
Oh, sorry. Yes, yeah, Jeff. Can I ask you to put in?
I mean, in terms of can we, yes, we could go and get the statistics and put them on a graph. I think that the point that perhaps you're making, if I'm understanding you correctly, is actually because of COVID, the world of work has changed.
Yeah.
We're talking, 5 years ago now, COVID came in. That we then had like the Great Resign, and actually you're looking now at a situation where I think a report came out earlier on this week saying that something like 3 million people are planning to resign from their job in the next year in the UK. The way that people approach careers, the way they approach their work-life balance, the way they approach their commitment to any organisation has changed significantly. So we could get figures pre-COVID. I think there would be a huge amount of caution that we'd have to apply to that because of the, working patterns have changed and certainly people's attitude to work has changed. And as I say, I have to keep reminding myself, COVID was 5 years ago now, and that's a long time in the world of work. But,
Sorry, I wasn't suggesting you do. I was just questioning the question. That makes...
Yeah, no, of course. Well, thank you, Jeff, for that comment. And yes, of course, Councillor Reeves.
The issue is, previously, when we had the COVID years in, we don't have that comparison. At the end of the day, this information is going to be relied upon by council to look at these factors. We don't have a normal time comparison when people were working 5 days to make that assessment. It might not be perfect, and I'm not suggesting it is, but as it currently stands, this doesn't really tell us anything about the current working arrangements by just having those 3 years. And 3 is not normally the best sort of sample. You normally want 5 in a sample to make it more effective. What I was saying is because of COVID, you might want to almost take those years out and put a precursor in from what it was like before. But the issue we have is we're looking at comparisons and we're just looking at 3 years. It doesn't give you that depth because it's 3 years of the same working pattern.
So yeah, so just to clarify, because I think I've got that point. What we're actually saying is that what we're looking at here is still the same because we've been within our trial period of the 4-day week within all this analysis that we're actually looking at right here. Yeah. So yeah, so actually then looking at sort of throughout COVID, although that could be skewed because of the COVID scenario. So then looking at the historical data might actually be useful to see, how productive that would be. So yeah, I get that, and actually I think it will be valuable for us to see if we can. But before we go on to that, yes, Councillor Hans-Raj, please.
I just would like to know that if we're looking at pre-COVID, we have the same staff to start with, and what other factors were there for sickness? I mean, it's more detailed than just looking at a chart on pre-COVID sickness.
Yeah.
And that's all. I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, agreed on both points, but yes and yes.
To be clear, I'm talking about voluntary turnover, not sickness.
Yeah. So Councillor Hans-Raj, I think it's very valid again looking at the sickness data, but actually on this particular point, I think we're looking at the voluntary turnover element that would be useful to have that scale, because again it paints a picture of the impactful or the impact that we've actually had. So yeah,
Jess, we can certainly provide more detail on voluntary turnover going back a few more years if that's helpful.
That'd be great if we could. Yes, fantastic. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Yes, of course.
Apologies, Chair. I'm mindful that you've got some questions and I'm feeling intrigued what they will be. And mine is just a comment and it's another plea, and I apologise, Joshua. I think I mentioned before, when we get the headings above the data, please, can the headings be on the same page as the data and maybe repeated at the bottom? I tried doing it when I was doing it on the screen and scrolling up and down, I almost got vertigo. And, and then just looking, I realise it's, it just would be really, really helpful. Please. Thank you, Joshua.
Super, thank you. Yes, I remember that coming up already once, so yes, if we could have that then, I think it would be safe for people's eyes, so thank you. Actually, my point was already addressed by Councillor Williams. It was actually to do with the voluntary turnover, because I was actually thinking that it's actually fairly good, I think, looking at it overall, but I think it would be really useful to then see what impact it's actually had over this course of time, so seeing a larger period. In addition, I can see that the data looks very positive when it comes to staffing at the moment, when it comes to the amount of jobs that have been advertised versus placements, which is looking particularly positive. So, that's great news, and thanks to all the officers that all their hard work on that side. It would just be good again to see sort of how that's been impacted historically as well. So if you know a little bit more data on that, that'd be fab. But other than that, have we got any other comments or thoughts or questions from members? Oh yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Not in relation to this item, if you want to take this up, if you're just saying in general.
Well, can we note the report first? Yeah, super. Okay, thank you. And yeah, I think we're almost at the end. So yes, of course, Councillor.
Thank you. It was just in relation to what was actually mentioned earlier on about local government reorganisation. This is going to have a huge impact, and I think it's important because with I think the proposed changes have now happened that this now becomes a scrutiny committee rather than these documents going to scrutiny, which I must admit I don't agree with. This is a governance committee. It makes it very difficult, like today we're having to scrutinise the documents rather than sort of look at the governance arrangements of the documents, because normally you would scrutinise the administration and the cabinet member, and it's going to get a bit more blurred. But I think LGR is something that is going to impact everybody so much that really we need a bit of a sort of flag system on all committees, but this one more than anything else, because there is a risk that people will start to look for employment at places that have already gone through it, look for that certainty, and I think that's something that we should encourage officers to go away and bring a report to us on, if other members are like-minded to think that that's important thing for us to monitor the impact it's having, because also then we can feed back and ask people, okay, do you feel well communicated on? Do we need to improve this? Do councillors need to engage more? Are you aware of what's going on? Because I think at the moment it's quite a range of anxieties around LGR for officers, and understandably so.
I think I think that's a very good point, and I think that yes, we'd be not doing our role here properly if we weren't taking that into consideration. So thank you for highlighting it. Jeff, do you have any thoughts or any comment just on that point? I don't expect to have a full answer.
Having gone through a sort of a mini version of LGR at Buckinghamshire, I have to say Councillor Heather Williams is exactly right. Increasingly, as you move towards vesting day, I think there's people feel a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. Clearly, particularly in the more senior levels of the organisation. I mean, I don't think there's any secret, at the moment, depending upon the number of councils we're talking about, there's 4 or 5 chief execs. There's not going to be 4 or 5 chief execs. There's not going to be 4 or 5 directors of finance. But not only that, people all through the organisation start to worry about where they're going to be working, who they're going to be working with, what policies they're going to be following. So it's something that we have to be really mindful. We have a slight advantage in so much as quite a lot of organisations are going through this, quite a lot of district councils. So you will probably get slightly less flight, because again, I agree with Councillor Williams, there's a real risk that particularly very able people who are able to go off and get another job elsewhere will look to go somewhere more secure. There's less secure jobs to move to because more organisations are going through this. But yeah, I would estimate that in the last year before vesting day, it will become quite impactful on our ability to deliver services if we're not preparing for it in advance and managing that.
Thank you. Yes, of course, Councillor Williams.
Thank you. May I suggest what might be helpful, we've done this in the past on other committees, is for members and officers to have a bit of a workshop as to what we think is useful to include doing internal survey, not just we pay for anything, because it could be about places of work, could be hours, it could be, like say, policies, lots of different things. And I wonder whether this is something actually we need to collaborate on, because at the end of the day, us as councillors are going to be the ones that are making that decision. And we're consulting at the moment, which I'm pleased about. I think it launched today. I think it did. Please, just nodding. Thank you. I haven't gone mad. That's good to know. But that internal viewpoint, I think, is really important. It's really important we get it right. And I also would like to raise my sort of concern in relation to which I've had with LGR and the 4-day week, which does intensify working, which works for some people, granted. I worry that we will lose actually those that are not quite at retirement, but potentially could retire. And actually there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that we need to keep, particularly with what's going on. But I'm worried that some people may think, do you know what, I'm off now. I don't need to be working like this anymore. And that, I think that's something that we concentrate on, rightly a lot on young people, and we concentrate on apprenticeships and everything. And I'm very, very pleased about that. Don't get me wrong. But we are at risk of losing the capacity of the other end, and the experience of the other end of the working sort of phasing. And I think that's been demonstrated in other organisations. Jeff's sort of nodding. And I wouldn't want to see us, because before, when we lost some senior members, particularly in accounts, it become a big problem if you lose too many people in that sort of tier too quickly. We don't want to see that again.
Agreed. I think looking at all demographics, it's very, very important that we're looking at retention as a whole. Yeah, I'm happy to help champion some kind of work group if that's from that side, and so you do perhaps more offline than in this forum, but absolutely yes. But yeah, again, Jeff, do you want to come back on any points, or are we comfortable with everything?
No, I'm comfortable with that. I'll perhaps liaise outside of this meeting with setting up a work group.
Super. That's great. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Any other points or anything before we close the meeting? No? Wonderful. Well, look, thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for your flexibility to move the date and time. I'm happy to say that the next one's on the 18th of September, which is now public. I've just said it, so that's what's happening. But thank you again for your time today, and see you in September.
Thank you, Chair.